Great. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Hello, I am Andrea Perdomo Morales, and I serve as co-chair of the Social Work Advisory Committee of the Kansas Behavioral Sciences Regulatory Board. I ask the members of the advisory committee to respond to a roll call to signify their presence at this open meeting that is being conducted remotely by conference call and other electronic medium. Carolyn Zaffron.
Present.
Donna Honer-Quayle.
Present.
Mike Gillette.
Mike, I believe you're muted.
I think you're unmuted now, Mike. Present. Okay, thank you, Mike, for that signal. Leanne Gendry. All right. Angie Heller Workman. Jane Holtzrichter.
Present.
Thank you. Kristen Stice.
Present.
Robin Unruh.
Present.
Thank you. I note the following BSRB staff members are also present. David Fye.
Here.
Leslie Allen.
Here.
Sammy Barksdale.
And Sammy is on the line, but she is doing administrative work for us behind the scenes. So
Perfect. Thank you. I also note that Jane Weiler, Assistant Attorney General for the Attorney General's Office, is in attendance.
Present.
Thank you, Jane. Next, David Fye will read a message concerning this meeting being held remotely.
This is David Fye, Executive Director for the Behavioral Sciences Regulatory Board. Public comment allows the public to address the advisory committee about its concerns, but the Kansas Open Meeting Act, or KOMA, does not require advisory committees to provide public comment or answer questions from individuals. Individuals requesting to provide public comment could contact the executive director prior to the meeting by sending an email to david.fye@ks.gov. One group of individuals requested to provide public comment at this meeting, and the co-chairs have allowed 10 to 15 minutes for public comment at the meeting to allow the advisory committee enough time for the additional items on the agenda. Because we are conducting the meeting, this public meeting remotely by conference call and other teleconference ability, I state for the record the following information. Public access to the meeting is being conducted by a medium of interactive communication that allows members of the public without cost to attend the meeting through the use of conference call and on the board's YouTube channel. While the meeting is being conducted remotely, the requirements of KOMA are not suspended, so we will be conducting this meeting pursuant to the KOMA. On August 19th, 2021, we sent notice of the advisory committee meeting to all individuals who had requested notice of the advisory committee meetings. The notice was also posted on the board's website, ksbsrb.ks.gov. You may obtain a copy of the notice at that website. An agenda and other meeting materials will be posted to the board's website on the day of the meeting, and those have been posted. You may also request a copy of the agenda by sending an email to david.fye@ks.gov with the subject line request for the agenda, and it will be sent to you. The notice contains information for the conference call and YouTube channel that allows the public to attend the meeting free of charge. The notice also states that if there are any technical issues during the meeting, you may call the board office at 785-296-3240, or currently, because we have limited staff here at the office, we would ask people to send an email to bsrb@ks.gov. A recording of the meeting will be available on the BSRB YouTube channel following the conclusion of the meeting, and that can be accessed by using the link to the meeting on the agenda.
Thank you, David. The meeting is now called to order, and the advisory committee will begin its discussion of the first item on its agenda. All right, so please, everybody should have received the agenda in their materials. First, we have public comment. So we have allowed 15 minutes for a group of individuals to speak with our advisory committee this afternoon. We're very pleased to have everyone here, and thank you for putting together an agenda and sticking to the 15 minutes. And we will turn it over to Kimberly Hunter, and the topic being call to courage, ethics, accountability, and unprofessional conduct concerns for Kansas social workers. So at this time, we will start the 15 minutes and turn it over to Kimberly Hunter.
Thank you, Co-Chair Andrea. Are you able to hear me? Good afternoon. Thank you for making time to listen to us today. We are here to share details about a complaint that was filed last month against licensed specialist clinical social worker 1385 Michael Peters, and to urge you to hold him accountable, so he and those whom he advises do not assume the authority to treat other Kansans the way Mr. Peters treated me. In June 2019, I sought protection from.
With the BSRB, if there is an active investigation currently pending, we're not allowed to comment while that's being investigated. If you could talk in generalities about any professional responsibility for social workers, and I might also kind of ask we received legal representation through the Attorney General's office, and we asked Jane Weiler here, she helps out the board with certain disciplinary matters. She might be able to clarify that too, but if there's an active investigation against a practitioner, that might be something that would be a little outside of the public comment. But Jane, could you add any information concerning any kind of open investigations?
Yeah, we can't make any, I mean, in general, we wouldn't be able to make any comments anyways during an open meeting. This is just a time for you to present any information. The members of the board and the committee are not required to even comment to you. They can listen. However, if this is regarding a present case, it's inappropriate because not all of our members of the committee are on the complaint review committee. And so you're conflicting everybody out. And so this is an inappropriate forum for this until the case has been finalized. And so it is actually, you're going to make it harder for the board when this case is ready for them, if you continue on.
And Ms. Hunter, I did want to let you know one thing too. So anyone can file a complaint against a practitioner. And so if there's any members here who have additional information that would be relevant to a possible ongoing complaint, I think the board would be happy to collect any of that information. There are forms on the website, or if anyone contacts the office, we can mail out forms, and any individuals can submit information that might be relevant to an active investigation or a complaint, or they can file any new complaints, and we'd be happy to review that information. It may not be the right forum right now, since this is a public meeting and we want to make sure that all that information is collected and then reviewed by the members of the board serving on the complaint review committee. So I noticed in the materials you provided to the advisory committee ahead of time, you mentioned that there were some rules of professional conduct that you wanted to have individuals comment on. And I think if it's general comments on those rules of professional conduct, I think that would be something that the advisory committee could definitely listen to. I think if it involves a specific person or an active investigation, that might be an issue for the reasons the Attorney General's office just described.
Thank you. Stephanie, they can hear you.
Oh, sorry. My name is Stephanie Kreibel. I'm the Executive Director of Into Account, and I know that I'm speaking out of order, but we're kind of trying to regroup and figure out what the best way of moving forward is here. If I could speak, I think, in some generalities, and I will. Perhaps what we could do is go in the order that we have established, and I think some people are probably going to decline to speak because their information is probably not going to help the investigation in terms of sharing it in this forum. But we will do our best to speak in generalities as much as possible, if that is okay. Okay,
and I think and Jane. In terms of providing some legal guidance to the board, if you feel like it does cross over into a matter that might be more relevant to the complaint review committee, and it doesn't focus specifically on the language of the rules of professional conduct, if you wouldn't mind interjecting, I would appreciate that. Because I do feel, in terms of providing public comment to the advisory committee, I think any discussion on the rules of professional conduct can be beneficial to the members as it relates to social workers. And I don't want to limit you from providing information. It just sounds like if it involves a practitioner specifically, that might be something that might be more helpful for the complaint review committee if it was submitted through those report of alleged violations. So just wanted to clarify that at the onset, just so we don't run into any issues with the technicalities here.
Thank you. I'll speak just to the general. I have a sign behind me that is also in your agenda with the specific regulations we're going to speak to. So I think I'll just refer to that. The first one was the item J in the policy, which says performing services inconsistent with accepted professional standards for social work. And I have some questions about how that applies, as well as the one that talks about a dual relationship with a client in a situation where a social worker is representing a religious institution who is a member of the institution, but also has services have been used because they are seen as a trauma-informed person because of their social work background, but when they're not actually working in a traditional client relationship, how that might apply to a dual relationship situation when they're providing advice about trauma-informed care for an individual. And I also had a question about the last one on this sign, which is being except as permitted by law, engaging in the diagnosis and treatment of mental disorders, how that applies when a social worker, again, outside of a traditional relationship with a client, contacts public authorities like law enforcement, making claims about someone's mental health diagnosis that are, one, incorrect and have been refuted by that person's actual therapist, and two, are inappropriate because the person about whom that social worker is making this statement is not their traditional client. So those are the 3 points that I would like to hear back from on the board if they feel they're able to speak to how that applies in those kind of unusual situations.
Well, and I might just offer this too. So the board really doesn't provide any kind of legal opinions on interpretation of the statutes, but also the oversight that the BSRB provides is largely an administrative function relating to the individual's ability to practice and their responsibilities due to their licensure. So I will say that in looking at these rules of professional conduct, if you feel like something goes beyond and crosses over into a criminal matter, I just want to make sure that individuals know that they're always welcome to submit that if you think that something is of a criminal matter to a legal authority, or if there may be matters that might be more of a civil nature, that might be another avenue. If you feel like something has been a violation and there have been maybe damages that could be pursued. But our remedies really primarily focus on administrative remedies. And generally the board doesn't really speak to kind of providing opinions on the interpretation of the rules. But if you do feel like there is a violation or based on a specific scenario involving someone licensed in Kansas, we would definitely be able to assist someone in submitting that information in a report of alleged violation, or some people refer to it as a complaint, but we refer to it as a report of alleged violation against the statutes or regulations. And we'd be happy to receive any of those and all information provided so our investigators could go ahead and look into those matters and fully investigate them.
Thank you. I will say that as the person most directly affected by this case, I considered those options, but I'm really not a person who seeks retaliation. It's just really important to me that the truth is known and that people are held accountable by the standards that authorize them. So that's why I was coming to this board specifically. I'm more interested in that process. I have one question before I'll cede my time to the remaining people. I have a file I was hoping to share that it is about me and that was obtained through a Kansas Public Open Records Act. And I was wondering if I could play the audio from that file since it is a public record already in the state of Kansas.
Well, since it sounds like it would relate to a specific case, I think that would be information maybe the investigator would find helpful if there's a complaint or a report of alleged violation. So instead of maybe doing that in this forum, we never specifically recommend that someone files a report of alleged violation in most cases, but if you would like to do that, I think it sounds like that information would be helpful. So I'm not sure this is the best forum for that. You may want to just contact our investigator and file a report, and then provide that information, because whether it's written or audio or visual, some of that information can definitely be collected and reviewed, and it may very well be that that's helpful information to the investigation.
I will cede my time to the next speaker.
My name is, am I next? My name is Charles Carney. I just want to say that generally speaking, I have grave concerns when a social worker uses his or her license in a conflict of interest to evict a person without following the landlord-tenant rules. And when the person intentionally creates a dual role for him or herself and becomes landlord, practitioner at the same time. So generally speaking, I would want to make sure that the board looks seriously at my concerns as a Kansan when a practitioner's license is used to intentionally harm somebody by making a false diagnosis. Thank you.
This is Jane Weiler, the litigation counsel for the board. If we're going to have comments like that, this is a very inappropriate forum for this. You need to write those down and submit them in. The advisory committee is not here to look at complaints. That's a whole different committee. And so giving even the statements that you made, sir, were, could very well be a violation of the Practice Act. However, this is not the committee that's going to make any determination on this, even down the road. All you are doing is still conflicting them out, because not all of these people serve on the complaint review committee, and it's going to be more detrimental down the road. If these are the kind of comments we're going to hear on the public forum, you're making it a lot harder for the board to actually perform their functions, because when you conflict them out, basically what you're doing is the board as a whole is the judge, but they can only hear the case when the case is ready, and that the opposing party, the licensee, and the board have an opportunity, the complaint review committee have the opportunity to take it to the judge. Anything they're hearing now is only conflicting them out. They're already going to have, it's like if you just went up to the judge and explained to the judge the information without having the other party there to give their side of the case. So if these are the kind of comments we're going to hear, this is, you're making it, the case is not going to be able to move forward. So I would just, I think this is a very inappropriate forum, because the advisory committee is not going to even ultimately hear the complaint. They are not going to be the ones to make any determination on the complaint.
Oh, okay, thank you. Yeah, since I didn't name any names, and since it was a theoretical situation, I thought it would be okay. But I hear what you're saying. Thank you.
So this is Willie Hunter, and I cede my time to the other people making comment.
Hi, my name is Adrienne Showalter Matlock, Reverend Adrienne Showalter Matlock, ordained minister in the Church of the Nazarene, and a resident of Kansas City, Kansas, and a housing advocate in my community. And I just wanted to ask, what types of comments does this board receive?
So this is a smaller unit from the board. This is made up of 3 board members, and then the rest of the group is practitioners or licensees. And so this group works to assist the overall work of the board when it comes to one of the 7 professions overseen by the board, so social work. So this committee largely reviews recommendations for changes to regulations or statutes, and really works on any items the board has referred to it or any items that it might make a recommendation on for the board to consider changing in statute or regulation. That's most of the general work of the advisory committee.
So this board receives comment on suggestions to changes to statute. So as opposed to enforcement of statute, is that correct?
So in terms of the application, for most of the things in statute or regulation, that's a little bit different. But this committee would talk about any modifications if the board had said they would like the advisory committee to discuss potential changes to statutes or regulations, or if the committee had items it wanted to offer and discuss and bring back to the board as a recommendation. In terms of applying those, that's kind of mostly outside of the general jurisdiction of the advisory committee. It really is a function just to advise the board in terms of possible changes to regulations and statutes.
I'm not sure if I'm supposed to proceed or not. This is Dwight Crable. I'll cede my time to the subsequent speakers.
This is Terry Rouse, and my comments were the particular case.
This is Jane Weiler again. Mr. Domo Morales, I believe their time is up for their public comment time.
Thank you, Jane.
Yeah, and I just want to add,
Excuse me, if we just have one more question, if you would allow. We just have one more question, if you would allow it, please.
Yeah, we were just interested because we do know that, a bit of details about this meeting were sent and communicated to you guys in advance. And so we were just kind of wondering why the meeting was accepted based off of the information that you have already received about what this meeting was referring to.
well, it's up to the chair's discretion in terms of allowing public comment under the Kansas Open Meeting Act. It's not required, but the information that I received was that the speakers would be talking to the rules of professional conduct in terms of what we had received. And there were, I believe, 6 different rules that were cited here. So if there was any discussion on recommendations to change these rules of professional conduct or maybe to make modifications to these, that's definitely something that the advisory committee has discussed in the past, is changes to those rules. That's definitely something that the advisory committee has discussed in the past. And it's something that public members, could weigh in on. But I also wanted to, my earlier comments too, if there is anything that any individuals attending this meeting or from the public would want to offer in regards to a possible report of alleged violation or complaint against a licensee, the board would welcome those. They just need to be submitted in writing on the forms so that they can be part of the investigative packet. So we don't want to discourage anyone from providing information. It's more a matter that this forum is a little bit different in purpose. And so I would encourage, any speakers who think that there is a violation against a practitioner to go ahead and provide those to the board in the appropriate format, because ultimately we are a public protection agency and we do want to do what's necessary to protect the public in this matter. But this is just a different type of forum. So I would encourage you all to fill out that information and provide it to the board on those forms.
When is the next full board meeting?
The next meeting of the board is on November 8th, and that would be from 10 to 1 p.m.
Would you be able to provide those details and information and instruction? Kimberly Hunter, I believe you have her email.
I can go ahead and send information on the next board meeting if that would be helpful.
That's to follow. And the steps for public comment to follow, just to make sure that we don't run into this again.
Okay. Yeah, and in terms of the jurisdiction of the board at a public meeting, it would likely be the same, but this material would be helpful for the board to receive, just not at a public meeting. This is information that the investigative team needs to receive to be able to do the investigation and to look into if there's been a violation against a practitioner. But you are welcome to attend the meeting of the board on November 8th. And if you wish to provide public comment, that could be requested from the chair of the board as well.
Thank you for your time and for making those next steps clear. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Kimberly. We know that you spent quite a bit of time organizing your thoughts and comments, and really would encourage you to take into account the different venues that David has covered to make sure that your concerns are expressed. So thank you all for your time with us this afternoon. All right, good afternoon. We will resume with our regular agenda items. It's always nice to have public comment, and thank you all for your time for that. We will move on. I do have a request if we can amend the agenda slightly. My apologies. I really would like an opportunity for our newest public board member to introduce herself, Ms. Donna Honer-Quayle. Is everyone in agreement if we add in introductions by Donna to the agenda?
I make a motion to add the introductions in so we can get to know Donna.
And I
Thank
second
you.
that motion.
Thank you, Carolyn, for that second. So we will turn it over to Donna, if you don't mind introducing yourself to the committee.
I would be happy to. My name is Donna Honer-Quayle. I live in Pratt. Have been a public board member now, I think maybe 2 months. So I'm excited to be a part of the board. My background is in the criminal justice field. I was a court services officer for 34 years. So I worked with a lot of addiction counselors, social workers, psychiatrists, psychologists, all of that. So I was really pleased to be on this board.
Thank you, Donna. We are very excited to have you. Appreciate that. Thank you for amending the agenda. We will move on to review and approval of the minutes from our May 18th meeting. I know it's been a while since we last met.
Hey, before we do that, I'm late coming into the meeting. This is Angie Heller-Workman, and I just wanted to let you know that I was present.
Thank you, Angie. Appreciate that. Welcome.
If there's a link, the Zoom, I couldn't locate it to get on, so I'm on my phone. So I'm not for sure if I sent an email to see if I could get that resent to me so I can log on officially. I'd appreciate it.
Okay, I'll go ahead and send that to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Angie. We'll look forward to having you on here shortly. Review and approval of the minutes for our May 18th meeting. If I can get a motion to approve, if there's no comments or concerns.
This is Caroline. I move that we approve the minutes of May 18th.
Thank you, Caroline. Can I get a second?
I will second them.
Thank you, Donna. Any discussion, concerns? All right, all in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you. Minutes approved for the May 18th meeting. The next item on our list is our Executive Director report by David Fye.
Thank you, Andrea. I will try to be brief here. Just a couple items I wanted to note for this Social Worker Advisory Committee. First is that there was a change in the chair since the last meeting of the board. And so since the last Social Work Advisory Committee meeting, the new chair of the board is Leslie Seawester and the new vice chair is Dave Anderson. So we are excited and working with both of those individuals and looking forward to working with them even more this coming year. On a sad note, a former executive director of the BSRB, Mary Ann Gable, passed away on September 1st. So we did go ahead and send flowers to the visitation on behalf of the board and the agency. and we wish the family well in the difficult time that they're experiencing right now. A few of the items that we've been working on here at the BSRB office: every state agency is required to submit a budget on September 15th of each year. We did go ahead and submit a budget for revised changes to fiscal year 2022, which is what we're in right now, as well as fiscal year 2023. And we did send some revisions to performance measures that we track here at the office. The budget for those 2 years was already approved last year, but because of changes, we made modifications and adjustments, taking those into account. Overall, we did go ahead and stick with the same amounts that were requested in last year's budget submission for both years. So we were able to see some savings due to less travel as a part of the COVID-19 pandemic, and we're able to use that to encounter some of the increases in cost. We also submitted a 3-year IT strategic plan for the agency. Just a couple of items I wanted to note for you. In the next 3 years, we hope to have the original licensure process moved to an online system for most people who want to access it that way. Right now, we renew licenses online for about 90% of those renewing licenses, but our original applications are still being done in paper. So we are hoping to, in the next year, move those towards an online system. It may take a little longer, but that's one of our goals. Another goal for the next 3 years is we have a number of paper records here at the office, and we hope to convert those to electronic records to make them more easily searchable, and also take up less space in the office and maybe cut down on the amount of storage costs that we have. We recently experienced an issue on the BSRB website. So if you heard any issues, that was involved with Sitefinity. It's a company that has most of the state agency websites. They did a rollover that unfortunately caused a number of issues. We lost a little information from the website, but we actively added all that information back and repaired a lot of links and different things like that. And it ultimately was rolled back before the change. So we are working with the company, and hopefully there is no other disruptions in the future. But wanted to clarify that in case you had heard any issues regarding our website or experienced those yourself. In terms of our staff, back in June, the governor had directed most state employees to return to working full-time in state agency offices. And so we had most of our staff back here. In late August, the governor reinstituted most agencies to have staff working from home when they could. So right now we have about 3 or 4 of us in the office at any given day. And we're trying to keep most staff at home. This is a way to space individuals out because of the COVID-19 pandemic and the variant. Right now, we know that we will continue that through the end of October, and then we hope to get word soon if that will be extended or if we'll be able to bring people back into the office full time. We did have a staff member resign about a month and a half ago, so we had requested permission to go ahead and fill that position, which we got. We went ahead and advertised for that position, and we did interviews last week. So we're in the process of reviewing background information, and we're hoping that we can make a decision on potential candidates here soon so that we can get back up to full staff. In terms of other items, as I mentioned earlier, the next board meeting is going to be in September. However, the board usually has a 1-day annual planning meeting. Because of the COVID-19 pandemic, that was decided to be held online, and it was split between 2 days. The first was at the end of September, September 27th, and the board discussed a number of issues. The second day will be in the afternoon of October 25th. And so that will be coming up here, and then the board meeting is going to be in November. And just the last item I wanted to add is that Leslie Allen and myself have done a number of speaking engagements recently to classes of social work students, both at the bachelor level and master's level. And we're going to be having a few more of those conversations too. Currently, those are over Zoom, so we're looking forward to the day that we can attend those meetings in person. But we've been trying to offer some guidance in terms of the licensure questions they might have, and then prepare them to go ahead and look through our statutes and regulations in terms of any disciplinary items that we have in statute and regulation. So with that, I'll go ahead and end my report and answer any questions.
Thank you, David. Any questions? Jane, did you have a question? No, okay. So that sounds like quite a feat to get everything into electronic records. And so good luck, and we're crossing our fingers for you all. All right. Thank you, David, for that report. Next business item is new items to be added to the agenda. Any requests from the Social Work Advisory Committee members on new items? All right, thank you. We'll move on to old business. So this is the NASW updates on social media, the review of unprofessional conduct regulations to identify gaps. And there was an attachment in your email, in your materials. David, do you want to touch base on this?
Sure. So one thing that I was invited to talk to a legislative committee recently. It's a committee that met last fall that spoke to mental health modernization and reform. And one of the things that they are looking on is consistent standards in terms of changing professions under the fields of mental health. And some of those have to do with telehealth, and some of those have to do with other items. And so one thing that the advisory committee had discussed in the past was looking at the professional conduct rules, perhaps in light of items involving social media. And so language was discussed previously, and it was noted that it would be helpful to see if any other groups had looked specifically at social media. And so there was a report that was put out. It was through a combined effort of NASW, ASWB, CSWE, and CSWA, and it had to do with standards for technology and social work practice. And so it's a lengthy document. It's about 60 pages, I believe, but included in this document, there is some language that deals with social media. So I wanted to provide it for the advisory committee to review with a mind towards looking at potential changes to the statutes and regulations on professional conduct to see if there should be any changes, taking into account the work that they had done, to see if we can apply that to the Kansas rules. There was discussion previously about, can we just adopt this or adopt a standard put out by another agency and just incorporate it into Kansas? And the answer is kind of yes and no. On one hand, the language itself is just text, and any of that language could be brought over. However, we've received recommendations not to go ahead and adopt just word for word the work of another group, or to tie ourselves to a document that could be revised by something outside of the BSRB, because that could be seen as a delegation of authority to that other group. So this is provided to the members as language to review, to look for potential changes. I think some of this is really helpful, but it's a nice thing to use when evaluating what Kansas should be looking at in the future in terms of modifying the language.
Thank you, David. Any discussion, thoughts?
So our next step then would be to review what has been, that we have in front of us, the technology standards that were developed by several professions, but then are we to come back and sort of come up with our own suggestions? Or, I mean, it's almost like reinventing the wheel, because it's such an elaborate and thorough standard.
Yeah, I think one thing the advisory committee could consider is using this text as something to consider. How much of this could we incorporate into Kansas, or should we incorporate into Kansas? So maybe at a future meeting, it might be helpful for the members to review the document specifically about social media or other kind of technology changes, maybe involving like privacy issues. That's another thing that legislative committee was looking at, and just see, is there any of this that we can bring over instead of trying to figure out from scratch all of the wording that we might be able to bring in. And also as a second step, while this is something that was specifically done by groups working with social work, how much of this might the Social Work Advisory Committee be able to bring to the full board as something that maybe could apply to the other professions? That's really more work of the board to see if it applies over, but that could be something in the thought process too, recommending it potentially for the change to the social work professions, but also things that maybe would apply to other professions as well.
So something that we're tasked with then is to review the standards from BSW, CSWE, ASWB, and SCWA, and just pull from that what we think could be used for our board. Just so that's one of our tasks, maybe for the next meeting, is to review that and pull out.
It's definitely going to take a while to do this because that's not an easy task. When we even looked at this, we saw how much work, was done to even present at the level that was, it's very comprehensive.
Yes, it is.
And it's very well done. And I hear what they're saying and I understand it. I think there is something to say about cutting and pasting and fluffing it just to change the wording, because there's only so many ways you can say some of the things that we're talking about when it comes to privacy, confidentiality, texting, all of the things that we're dealing with today. I think the most important thing is we need to get something in writing and done. It's something that is needed, and it's probably past needed at this point.
So as I'm looking at a vision, do you think maybe the next 3 months or 6 months we could, because it is going to take a long time. My biggest fear is I'm going to highlight everything, because it is really well written, but should we come up with a projected date where we'd like to maybe have something done? Otherwise it's going to sort of float around for a while.
And
we could look at the end of the year for having, something ready to go, or at least a draft. But I'm sorry, Andrea.
No, I'm sorry, I interrupted you. I know that prior to me coming on the advisory committee, there was a subcommittee that was working on this. Are we recommending that the subcommittee continue to work on that, or?
I really think at this point that we need to do it as a group.
Okay.
If we're going to pound this out, we got the good information in front of us. Now it's a matter of what do we want as a state that we want to really take a look at as a compliance and, a regulation. Will this be a regulation, David?
I think that would be the cleanest place to add it. Would be looking at the professional responsibility regulations and adding language or changing it in regards to applying the social media standards or privacy standards.
Okay.
So maybe that's what we need to do is just, put 30 minutes of time or something each month to this. It'll take every bit that, I think. Don't you, Carolyn? Just thinking what Kristen and Mike, everybody, what we worked on just the other ones.
Is Mike still here? I don't see him.
Someone just entered the conference call. If you're on the conference call, could you identify yourself?
Yeah, this is Mike Gillette. I keep losing the video connection, so I called in.
Thank you.
That would be my my thought is to go ahead and just
and Mike, if you have the YouTube stream up, go ahead and mute the YouTube.
It's okay, Mike. We're just talking about technology.
That's a violation.
Hi in there. Kristen, were you going to add something?
I'm going to add something.
Sorry, Mike, if you have the volume on your YouTube, go ahead and mute that because there's a little bit of a lag. So thank you.
Right, I understand.
Okay.
Ready for me?
We're good.
Okay. I think I just need a little bit more clarification in my own mind of what the ask is. And I think I'd mentioned this before. Mike and Jane and I can't remember who else was there, had reviewed something in February, and my years are running together, so I can't remember if it was February or the February before, and I had presented it as what we recommended for the social media clause. And then we went into this where we got more resources. So are you looking for, does it need to be like a list, or how do you want the format of it to be? I know the 68-page document seems like a lot for anybody to go through. I'm just trying to figure out what that looks like, what you want the finished product to look like. I think that will help me envision what you're asking for.
Yeah, I think we should have some kind of a task or a goal, a time frame. Let's say, because I was looking at all these items, there's a whole bunch of them. Whether we need to go through the 53 standards that they have listed, and maybe for the first step is reviewing 1 to 16 or something and coming back, and then the next task, for our next meeting would be reviewing 16 to, some kind of small steps where we're organized in what we're asking the committee to do and to be prepared for when we meet, would be my thought. Something reasonable, because I would agree to do the whole thing, and it is overwhelming. But if we do it in small steps and increments, we might get there.
Okay, so what do we think is a good first step for the December meeting?
So was Kristen asking, like, if we're supposed to come up with a pamphlet, or like, is that what you're asking? Like, what are we going to end up? Is this something that we're going to be able to, like, a PDF file people can refer to, or?
Yeah, I may have just forgotten, because I do that a lot these days, but is the final goal for this to be something that's posted on the website, or is it something that goes into the statutes, like what they were just speaking of at the beginning of the meeting?
Right.
What's the final goal of the policy?
Yeah, the final goal, I think, would be any proposed changes to the regulations or be a new statute. It would have to be a major change really to be a statute, but looking at things that might fall under the current professional responsibility regulations, that perhaps the language was written in the past and there needs to be new provisions added based on changes in technology, or things that perhaps didn't even exist when the original language was written. So incorporating changes over time and new technology. So I think the end product wouldn't be an advisory, kind of thing. It would be more of, how do we take the existing statutes and regulations, and what can we take from this document as ideas to go ahead and add to that language that's already in the professional conduct regulations, to make sure we're covering things that need to be covered now based on how things have changed.
So I'm specifically detailed. Like, we don't need to have in there, like, cannot have Snapchat relationship with whoever. It just needs to be high level, like, these forms of social media aren't acceptable for a professional relationship. Yes, or does it need to be that detailed that we take it down to the 68, like the 68 pages? That seems longer than any other regulation we have.
What we have to look at. I think that's something that we look at when we start looking at the, saying 1 to 16, bullets. What do we want? What do we want it to say? What's our end goal here? And what are we going to present? Because if we're looking at an overarching regulation for all licenses, which I like that idea. I like to be uniformed when it comes to things like this, instead of social workers, I like to be on the leading front of things, but I think we all need to carry this torch when it comes to the professional licenses. And so that's where the board puts that together, and the attorneys put the language together.
Yeah.
My next question would be, why would Kansas be different than anybody else if this regulation was put together by professional organizations and it's kind of, nationwide? Why would we look to edit it, make it specific to Kansas rather than keep it somewhat?
I don't know that it would be edited specific to Kansas. What I'm hearing, and I could be hearing it incorrectly, is that the way that it's currently written may be outdated and not incorporate all of the newer technology dilemmas or that we're confronting now. And so I don't know what everybody thinks about reading the original language and then coming to the next board meeting with the items that the newer attachment, what are our recommendations from the newer attachment that need to be added to the current language? Does that make any sense?
It does, and the pamphlet is a national, organizational perspective. Every state jurisdiction will have different, statutes and regulations, I would imagine, in their districts. And so what I think would be helpful is there any way that you could send our current statutes and regulations on the technology piece? And I think that might be helpful to know what we have now. And as we're reading through this new kind of updated standards, that we could see where we're falling short or where we need to add,
So does anybody have anything?
I'm sorry.
There's general rules of professional conduct. And
Yes.
I think that's kind of what we could send out. But in terms of finding something that talks about technology and talks about standards, that's really something to see how to take that from a document such as this and see if you can incorporate those ideas and put them into new changes to the rules of professional conduct for social workers.
Right, because that's how this all started.
Mm-hmm.
That's how it all started with what you just said, because we really don't have anything in writing. So, and the texting issues and all of the exchanging has kind of gotten out there quite a bit.
Right.
So
we really have moved fast on technology. Just so
Yeah.
fast that we haven't been able to keep up with things. So I think that, to look at our current regulations under unprofessional conduct or professional conduct would help us to see what's there and what we need to add.
Is everybody in agreement with that? Yes, okay. Kristen, go ahead.
No, I mean, I think that I am in agreement with it. If we follow through on doing that by the next meeting, I think we tend to spin on this issue a little bit because we wait until the meeting and then we start reviewing paperwork, so I think if people are committed to that, then I think it's great.
Yeah, exactly. Because we have a lot of other things, our new application process will take a little bit of time. So we've got a lot to do.
All right, well, it sounds like we have a plan and an agreement for our December meeting to review the current general rules of professional conduct, compare that to the attachment that we all have of the 63-page attachment and see what items are missing from our current general rules and come back with recommendations in December. Sound good? All right, well, in the interest of time, we do have an hour left and we have some pretty big items to get to. So we'll move right along to our next agenda item, which is clinical supervision. So in your materials, you should have received some proposed questions that we would like to send an updated survey out to all of our social worker licensees in Kansas. So if I understand correctly, and Carolyn, please jump in with anything that I've missed. It is of the utmost importance for this committee and our board to have up-to-date information on what our licensees are in need of, what they're wanting, so that we can respond accordingly. And it's been a couple of years since we have done any sort of formal survey with our licensees. And so what we would like to do is bring that back and make sure that we have the updated, most correct questions that will lead us to be able to take different recommendations that we're hearing and move forward with those. So anybody have any proposed additional questions or any concerns with the current questions that are on the draft?
Well, I did want to do that. There was originally a different set of survey questions last time the survey had been put out there. And when the advisory committee last met, they had asked me to go ahead and look at the language and look at different potential questions to put on here. And so I did go ahead and offer up some draft language on some potential questions, trying to cover some of the issues as it relates to supervision. And then there were a couple of questions that are a little outside of that towards the end that talk about one of the items that the board is currently considering in terms of requiring continued education and diversity, equity, and inclusion. So those are a little bit outside of that, but trying to think of items relevant for social work that you may want to have licensees weigh in on. So.
I'm kind of curious too, because this was a questions, and I would agree with you, Andrea, that the former survey was in 15. And at that time, there was huge support of having some mandate. And since there's like 23, I think, jurisdictions that do have some requirements varying. But I'm wondering if people feel that quality supervision is related to public safety. And because I think that it is, and I would hope that there would be some question. And I'm sorry, David, I haven't had a chance to really go through those in detail, but I think that might be a good question. Because there's a lot of people that are trained by supervisors that, are not equipped to provide quality supervision, and many are, qualified, but, the ones that have experienced real negative, experiences, directly impacted, by that experience. But anyways, do we have anything about public safety as it to get people?
So it does start off with some questions about what county do you practice, and then do you practice in an urban area or rural area? Because there have been questions by members of the legislature to look at specific topics involved with people who are working in rural areas. And then it says, do you provide clinical supervision? And if so, how many individuals do you provide clinical supervision to at the same time? And then when you first provided supervision to practitioners, what training had you received prior, to get an idea of the level of training that our individuals providing supervision have had. And then it talks a little bit more about people who have received clinical supervision. And then it says, when you received clinical supervision, did you encounter any issues related to the quality of the supervision? And then if they did, then explain. And then would they be supportive of the BSRB requiring LSCSWs that provide clinical supervision to take X number of continuing education hours and supervisory training within their 40 total hours during each licensure renewal period? And there's a few other things. Yeah, so part of it was just trying to identify any issues individuals have received through any kind of supervision, and seeing, how many people are receiving supervision at the same time, and get an idea of the training they've received, and to see if there is support for requiring continuing education as a requirement for providing supervision.
And I think that getting back to, is this a public concern? Is this related to public safety? I think it is, but I think when the opponents seem to think to take a look at that, like NSWS, not overtaxing or not overburdening, people by not asking them for something else, versus is this public protection issue? And I believe that it is, can be. So, but anyways, I'd be real interested to see how people view that.
Are you looking at doing this by a survey monkey type of a survey system, or like what you have here, where it's more writing?
So the last survey that was done, there was an opportunity to have certain boxes of providing additional information. So I think probably it would be the same sort of format where they would have a chance to elaborate. So we would ask them for a specific answer to try to get numbers, to quantify it, but then try to get some of that qualitative information with a text box.
Yes, last we had both. We had quantitative and qualitative, which was real helpful. I think the quantitative especially.
Right. And I think you always want that in a survey. That my question is back to, is it going to be like an electronic from a survey monkey where they can just pop on and do it because you want to make it as easy as you can for them so that they will answer it. And if it gets too lengthy, we'll just ignore it.
That's true. Last time it was Survey Monkey, and we had a pretty good response. I think
Yeah.
can speak to that. We had over 500, and that's pretty good.
That's an excellent response.
And I think how many was 1,000 was. I can't remember the specifics, but yeah, I think keeping it short and having the survey both qualitative and quantitative is beneficial.
Yeah, and using that Likert. So,
yep, and it was pretty easy to complete. Really, we had 10 questions, I think, last time, or kept it down, something like that.
David, is that possible to do a Survey Monkey again?
I don't think we have a current account, but I think we can get one. And so I think we should be able to do it again.
If you keep it below a certain number of questions, I think it's 10, it might be 12, but you get it free. But you might check into them. And there's more than just Survey Monkey out there today. I just use that one because that's the one I know.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of good ones out there.
And the board has been using Doodle Poll for some of the scheduling, but that one is limited to 49 respondents, a little different. But.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know Survey Monkey does offer some free options, but if you do get the paid, you can filter the responses in several different ways that I think would be helpful for us to manage the data instead of doing some manual counts.
Yeah, we use Qualtrics at the National Children's Alliance, and it's really a good one. It gives you a lot of the options.
And with the 2022 legislation just right around the corner, I'm hoping that we could get something out so that we could make decisions whether we want to have that on our agenda or not. I think it'd be very helpful to have if we decide as a committee or the board to pursue that again, to have more organized data, present, including the new survey, I think would be good.
Well, and I think even the question centered around telesupervision, with the urban and the rural. And the other thing that I think people sometimes don't think about is there's really 3 geographical locations today that they talk about, and it's really urban, rural, and frontier. And frontier doesn't really get talked about much, but it is the western Kansas, the south central, southwest Kansas, and that gets used a lot in grants and demographics today. So you might consider putting 3 options, because someone with a very, very small population, they may not see themselves as even rural anymore.
That's a very good point.
Or define it, making sure you define it.
I think those are good additions.
So David, you'll look into what platforms might be available that we can potentially manipulate the data that we receive.
Yeah, and there was a question. There was a question on telesupervision. Was that on that? Could you elaborate a little bit more on what you wanted to focus on the telesupervision?
Well, I'm not for sure I even know. I was just thinking, because we're talking so much about telehealth and being able to do supervision this way, is it something that we can pose a question to? Is it something information we want to gather for if we do go in front of legislation, or you do have to present information about, even what we've been talking about in making a regulation with all of our electronics and everything? Do we want to support that through what we may find in a survey?
Also, I was thinking too, isn't televideo a term they use versus telehealth, since it's, you might look at the different verbiage on that.
Okay.
State at state level.
Thank you.
We currently use televideo in our regulations. That's what I thought. Yeah.
Good catch, Angie. All right, any additional questions?
I don't think so.
Okay, well, I think that'll be very exciting to make sure that we're having updated information, hearing directly from our licensees. And so I appreciate your guys' support and help in coming up with those questions. And David, thank you for your work on that as well.
And I'll also check with ASWB to see if there's been any changes or additional jurisdictions they've added from last time. There's quite a few last time, but they may have added some on that. I don't know. Just get current information again. Make sure that we're factual. If we support it, if we don't, it's irrelevant. So, but yeah.
Thank you, Carolyn. All right, the other item, there are some questions regarding this item on the survey questions that we just read, but we put it under old business because this committee has talked about it before, but it has come up again at the board level, where the board is wanting some feedback from our committee as far as considering a proposal requiring continuing education in the areas of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so I think when we've talked about it in the past, I think it was interpreted, and correct me if I'm wrong, as if this would be in addition to the already required categories. But I think one of the committees at the board meeting had discussed that this could be looked at as you would just overlay it on top of some of the already required subjects. So as an example, ethics is already required. So would our licensees be able to look for a CEU that had DE&I or diversity, equity, and inclusion weaved into ethics? So that is what we're bringing back to the table to see what thoughts the committee has on that view. Is that correct, David and Leslie? Did I get that right?
Yes, and the board had a good discussion at the September 27th meeting, and because I think some of the advisory committees took different approaches in looking at this topic to see if those how it could be implemented, if there was a requirement for continuing education in this area, because some were in favor of, I guess there was the idea of just adding it to the number of required hours. And so for most of the professions, if you're at a level where you are able to diagnose, you have a 3-hour requirement in ethics, and then you have a 6-hour requirement in diagnosis and treatment. And for individuals that are at a lower level where they're not able to diagnose, there's still 3 hours of ethics. And so one consideration could have been to add this as an additional requirement. So within your current number of hours, you would need to get, so let's example, 3 hours in ethics and then 3 hours in diagnosis or DEI, the diversity, equity, and inclusion. Currently, the BSRB does not allow things to count for more than one category. So for those practitioners who are able to diagnose and treat, we would look for 3 hours to independently satisfy the requirement on ethics, and then 6 hours to satisfy the requirement on diagnosis and treatment. And one method could be, as you mentioned, to go ahead and require 3 hours, but to say that if those 3 hours in diversity, equity, and inclusion also counted for ethics, you could satisfy both of those requirements. Or if you had 6 hours of diagnosis and treatment, and within that 6 hours, you could get 3 hours of the diversity, equity, and inclusion, then that would be allowed to count. So we would still look for 2 separate groups of the ethics hours and the diagnosis and treatment hours, but we would allow overlapping. That's kind of the proposal that the board had been talking about at the last meeting, to do that. And so I want to make it very clear, because there's been a little bit of confusion. There wasn't really an option to go ahead and not require ethics hours anymore. It was just that within those hours, you could also satisfy this requirement to overlap like you talked about.
I'm still a little confused because every 2-year renewals, you have to do 3 hours of ethics. So are you saying that from now on, those 3 hours have to be in continuing ed courses that include the word inclusive? Because, they're named so many different things, ethics and documentation, ethics. And so I mean, there's so many different categories that fall, so many different diversity categories that fall under ethics. So to me, it's kind of confusing, but that doesn't mean I'm not open-minded. But I mentioned to David and Andrea, when I was looking at our code of ethics in ESW, the code of ethics and the new revisions that are coming up, I guess, in 2021, the word inclusive is not even is not a concept that's even in our code of ethics. However, diversity, biases, discrimination against culture, race, I mean, it includes major things. And biases would be a part of include. I mean, if you have biases, you're excluding some, but it doesn't use the word even in our code of ethics. I went to ASWB in their Practice Act standards. Nothing. And I think this is kind of a new word, and I'm not saying that's good or bad or right or wrong, but I'd rather us wait to see, that language being put into our code of ethics before we create anything new, because in 2 years, it might be another word. And also the revisions for 2021, I thought maybe would include something with inclusion, but it's on self-care. They're going to be adding more on self-care, which I think is a very, very relevant. There's just so many areas that are important. Those are kind of my thoughts. I think if under the 3 hours that are required, if a person feels like they need extra training in that area, and if there's new workshops available, they can take that, or we can all take it. It doesn't matter. But to be required to do that, I think, is a different.
What if we could just highly recommend it, Carolyn?
Yeah, highly recommended, but I don't know that we should require that. But that's my thought, especially looking at our code of ethics and not even seeing that relatively new concept included, not even in the revisions. I'm just, again, that's my take. I'm willing and open to do whatever the committee would want to do and keep it in mind. I just don't want to take extra hours. I just don't feel like we need to take any extra hours.
Yeah, I think those are some great points, Carolyn. During our board meeting, we did have a board member say that this really is not a new topic for their profession in general, that it's been something that they have been trying to advocate for and to bring up to the surface a little bit more. The other thing that came up during our board meeting is that it is hard to find some trainings that our focus area is on diversity, equity, and inclusion, which, Carolyn, I agree that is a very broad topic. It could be rule, it could be a lot of different things under that. But it was brought up that it is tricky to find some trainings that would fall under the DEI. And so I think if we were forward thinking and knowing that as social workers, we do want to be inclusive, if we do talk about this a little bit more, then my hope would be that there would be more trainings that are created around these areas to then bring more awareness to us on this call, to our fellow licensees. And that would kind of set a domino effect. So I would just throw some of those comments in from the board meeting that we had.
And I would also think that KNSW would be the first people that would start offering more CEUs. They offer CEUs all the time, and as well as other providers, single providers. I mean, we can always encourage that to grow.
Well, speaking from someone that does a lot of trainings out there in the world, between the governor's office, the attorney general's office, we have a lot of this already being offered. And a lot of social workers are attending those trainings. I haven't noticed it being a really big issue. I think it's a matter of attending. There's a lot online. We have to use, again, Relias and some of those things that are out there. There's some excellent ones out there online. I think with my feelings on this is it is needed. I believe that cultural diversity, all of that's needed. It's for everyone. But I also think we have that beauty of being able to pick up extra hours where we want to. And that's where we go with those hours. If they want more information on it, more education and learning on it, that is their choice to pick those up. I think we need to leave ethics where ethics is. I think we have enough of the issues that are coming to the board, and our advisory council, just heard things today that we need to leave the ethics alone.
Ethics was not going away.
No, I understand that. I mean, I think we just need to leave it where it's at. No, thank you, Leslie, for assuring that.
And also too,
we don't want that one to go away.
I've been around in practice for a long time, but I see includes the new term concept. And we have new terms all along. I see that as 101 social work ethics. I mean, that is pounded in the educational training. And we're supposed to be doing, and I could just speak for Washburn, my experience, that was always included, just all sorts of ways that we can exclude or out people, discriminate, oppress, that was just, that's just basic ethics to me, but that's my old way of thinking, trying to move fast forward to today's time. But I do believe this concept is relatively new, and I think it's a good to have.
Yeah, it's a good conversation. Absolutely.
I'm with
I also, sorry, Carolyn, go ahead. Sorry. I have a little lag.
That's okay.
I was just thinking before you go on, is there a place like we could just highlight places where people could look at things like that? Like if it's like an on-demand seminar or some kind of literature or something.
We can't advertise anything on our website.
I mean, like as professionals, I wonder like if KNS or, when people are doing the educational opportunities, that's something that can be brought to their attention to make sure that they, just share that with everybody at large, I guess is what I'm saying. But
yeah, I think through education, that would be definitely a new area that they can concentrate more on or to elaborate more on or extend more on. I think it's being present now, presented now, but also KNSW can offer new insights and new workshops. And I'm with Jane, there's a lot of online opportunities if someone wanted to do that, and so, but I just think we need to leave ethics alone under that category. But that's my take. What are other people feeling?
You also can't replace ethics with DE&I. It's simply that if you took ethics in diversity, equity, and inclusion, you could count it for both areas. That's all it means. Ethics still has to be ethics, and diagnosis and treatment still has to be diagnosis and treatment. It would just be if DEI was included in that, then you would not have to take DEI separately.
Mm-hmm.
Would it have to include all three of those or one of the three?
Excuse me?
Would the CEU have to include all three of those things or one
You would have to have all three, but you could DE&I could be counted with your ethics if it was in your ethics course or in your diagnosis and treatment, like diagnosing bipolar in a special population or something like that. Then it could count for your diagnosis and treatment and your DEI. But other people
already,
excuse me,
doesn't it already on like diagnosis and assessments?
Yes.
If you did diagnosis and assessments for a special population, that would already fit under to those 5 hours.
Right. They were just saying if you got that if they changed the statute and required 3 hours, currently we don't allow you to double count 3 hours. You would have to have 3 hours of ethics, whether it was in DEI, and then 3 hours of DEI. And that's just a regulation or how a policy
I think it's too confusing to go their way. I really do.
It's just too confusing. And I think too, to include the pre-existing ethic workshops to kind of revise all those would take a massive amount of work for all the single providers or that currently have, ethics classes. You'd have to revise and, submit, I guess maybe to have another approval to make sure that was included in, inclusion was included in their current.
I don't think that would mean that every
No.
trainer would have to do that. Only trainers that would want to could offer that. I think also, Carolyn, the information that you researched is helpful to know that Missouri has adopted this and will be implementing it in 2022 as well.
I think I sent information. I think there's 2 jurisdictions. I talked to ASWB. There's only 2 jurisdictions, and I think I sent you and David the written regulations, but I don't know if that was sent to the committee members. But that's 2 out of 50.
Yeah, that's not very good.
And I'm sure it's going to grow. I'm sure it will grow. But right now it's just sort of a new thing, and the recent ones have been relatively new. Those workshops. So I think that's something we need to keep in mind too, is being consistent with the national jurisdiction requirements. As much as possible.
Make a plea, we do not accept the recommendation for now.
Is that a motion or?
Well, I made a motion that we don't accept the recommendation to separate it or to, I don't know, do we want to make a motion to move it on or just?
What's needed? I don't know.
Well, they did ask for feedback from the advisory committees, and it sounded like from that last meeting, the proposal they were sort of looking at the very end was what would the advisory committees think about requiring the hours but allowing for the double counting of the hours. So if you had a recommendation that could be provided back to the board, or otherwise you could just comment on the discussion. So either one would be fine.
I have no problem with saying I make a recommendation or I make a motion that we do not double the hours.
And just to clarify, so is your motion not to require hours in diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Yes, thank you.
Just keep ethics under.
Leave ethics the way it is.
And all the diverse, with all the diversity that's underneath that umbrella. I mean, I certainly think tabling, and just waiting a little bit, I'm not saying that we couldn't, but right now that's my feeling, but I don't know. We've got a motion. Do we need to second that motion or?
Yes.
Yeah, I would, Mike, I would support that motion.
You second the motion, Mike?
Roger, that's correct.
Thank you.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Hey, I don't know if you need a count or a hand raise since
It looks like we have Jane, Angie, Kristen, Carolyn, and Donna. All right, all those opposed. Oh, Robin, are you for?
Yes.
All right.
Sorry.
All those opposed, which would be me. Okay, looks like that we all are in agreement then, the majority wins that DEI would not be a requirement right now. Okay, so it's 2:34. Moving on to our next agenda item, which I think could potentially take the rest of our time. Are you needing to get off, Jane?
Nope, I'm going, but you're going to go with me.
Oh,
So,
all right.
But I have an hour drive because I have to referee tonight. So,
Well, good luck.
so you're just
All
gonna be in
right.
the car sitting in the chair.
Thank you, Jane. I don't know if you want to mute on your way out.
Yes, I will.
Thank you. All right, so the next agenda item is new business, our advisory committee membership. I will turn it over to David to open it up, and then Carolyn will help to facilitate the conversation.
Okay, thank you. In your packet, there was a one-page handout. It summarizes the purpose of the advisory committees and also the mechanics of doing the advisory committee selection. So I refer to a couple things in this document just to briefly talk about the mechanics of evaluating candidates for the advisory committees. The advisory committees are under the board. They have the purpose of supporting the board and carrying out its mission to protect the public. And they do actions relating to informing, licensing, and discipline of those persons regulated by the board. The process by which the advisory committee fulfills its purpose is by addressing issues referred to it by the board through the advisory committee chairman or chairperson or the executive director. And they can also refer issues to the board for consideration. The structure of the advisory committee, you have chairperson of the advisory committee who's a board member licensed in the relevant discipline of the advisory committee. For this, you also have another individual who sits on the board in that profession. You also have a public member of the board, and then you have a minimum of 3 additional members appointed. And there is no maximum under the board governance policy right now. So it's been talked about that there would be no more than 10 non-board members on an advisory committee, but that language doesn't appear in the board governance policy. It's just been sort of a verbal tradition. In terms of the terms of the advisory committee members can serve 2-year terms, and they will serve no more than 4 terms, so 8 years maximum. Appointments to the advisory committee should be staggered, and policies and procedures under which the BSRB board members are expected to operate will also apply to advisory committee members. The board governance policy talks about policies and procedures relating to board members, such as avoiding things like improprieties, conflicts of interest, that kind of thing. So the things that apply to the board members should also apply to the advisory committee members when evaluating those individuals. In terms of the selection process, members of the advisory committee can be nominated by anyone. They are licensees, and we did send a message out to individuals at the end of June, beginning of July, for anyone to nominate themselves for consideration. And we had 30 individuals who submitted materials. They submitted letters of interest and resumes, which you received and had a chance to review. It talks about in reviewing the nominations, the advisory committee should work to ensure there's representation based on geographical, gender, and public versus private settings. The members shall provide representation of the levels of licensing for that discipline, and it is suggested that those members be selected from among the public and private practitioners and educators. In terms of how you will do this process to evaluate candidates, the advisory committee as a whole discusses nominations in an open meeting like this. You will review the material from the 30 different applicants, and you will reach recommendations on any new members that should be added to the committee. The chairperson of the advisory committee will submit the names of the recommendations to the chair of the board, and the chair will have the opportunity to review the nominations and can request additional input before making a decision. And then the chairperson of the BSRB has the ultimate authority to add members to the advisory committee or to remove members from the advisory committee. And then there's little language here that talks about the executive director's responsibility to notify members that they've been selected, but that's sort of how the process works. So just pay close attention to what it asks to look for in terms of representation. And also keep in mind that the expectations of board members should also apply to expectations of advisory committee members when evaluating candidates. And in terms of the process of picking candidates for the advisory committee, my purpose in this process is to help you with any of the mechanics if you have questions. But in terms of actually expressing favoritism over one candidate versus the other, I'll be a neutral party in this. So I will assist you with the process, but it'll be your discussions and how you choose to recommend individuals that will be a little bit separate from any input that I put out.
Any questions for David before I? Okay. Andrea, are you okay with me going ahead?
Yeah,
I thought before we looked at the new applicants, we might want to take a look at our current social work advisory committee and the diversity with that. And so, like David said, which is really cool, now out of 6 members, we have three that have been here 3 years and three that have been 5 years. So that's a pretty neat division. We have other diversity representation. What we see, we have 1 male and 5 females. Just as I'm going through these, we're looking at gaps or potential needs. Regarding private or versus public, we have 1 private practice practitioner, and I believe that's Kristen, because I think she's an you're an LLC. Is that correct, Kristen?
I'm an LSCSW.
Oh, you're an LSCSW? Okay. Yes, I have that down. And you're in private practice?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So we have 1 in private practice, and the remaining are in public agencies of some sort. Regarding levels, we have 1 BSW, 2 MSWs, and 3 LSCSWs. And of those, 1 of the MSWs has an addiction. Let me see how it's the licensed MSW in our advisory board has a LMAC, and another LSCSW on our committee has an LCA, which shows that there are some members that have some information on addiction, which is a real important area. Other diversities regarding, and there's no educational or social work PhDs, if that's an area that we want to consider, education. And that, as I was looking at the applicants, there are some non-PhD persons that are not, that are currently employed in universities. So that's generally those levels of representation we have now. Of counties, David, maybe you can put that little map. I asked David to, I marked the geographical areas of our current members because I'm kind of a visual person, but I don't have the technology like Andrea and David has to do that, to share that. And to me, it just gives a visual of where we're located. I kind of highlighted them. So you can kind of see, I'm sorry I didn't send this with you, but you probably maybe have done this yourself, but you can kind of see where our members are located and some of the areas where we need to consider geographically. And go ahead.
Excuse me.
Yes.
This is Mike.
Yes, Mike.
Mike Gillette. I have the clinical license at this point. I'm not sure what your list shows.
I have LSCSW for you, Mike.
Okay, that's correct. Thank you.
And LMAC.
Yes, LMAT. So actually, yeah.
Right, correct. Correct. Okay.
Yes. And so just looking at the counties, just visual, there seems to be north, northwest, or northeast or east spots. We can talk about that later in terms of potential needs. But one other area that I'd like to talk about is kind of our specialized focus in our membership. I was wondering if we could just take a quick review. Like Mike, you have a lot of knowledge in military, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, and Leanne, I have you down as, is Leanne here? No, she's not. I couldn't remember if Leanne was here, sorry. No, she was absent, okay. But I have Leanne as in a mental health facility for county. So I don't know if that's embracing just adults or children or what, or all of them. Angie, I have you down for aging and disability. Is that correct? I lost Angie. And Jane, I have you down for Horizons Mental Health. And Kristen and Private Practice, and Robin and Genesis Family Health Center. So we have mental health agencies, I guess I would categorize those under. I didn't, so when I was pulling that together.
Genesis is an FQHC, by the way. We do everything integrated care.
In which one? I'm sorry.
This is Robin, Genesis Family Health.
Do everything. And
we're a federally qualified health center, so we do everything.
Excellent. That's wonderful. So
Carolyn,
yes,
this is Angie. Sorry, I couldn't find my unmute button. I kind of changed from adults to children.
Oh,
I did
okay.
the 3 children's waivers for the state.
Children's disabilities.
Yep. Yeah. Well, mental health as well.
Mental health and children.
Mental health and technically assistance waiver, the TA waiver, and then the autism.
Okay. That's great. So I'm just reviewing those areas because I think, and not only do we want diversity with gender and geographical location and levels, I think it's important to kind of look at each member's specialty as well. So, and so as I was looking at that, some potential needs, and again, just or gaps might be under male BSWs. We only have one. And we do not have a social work PhD degree. And we have a PhD people, but not necessarily in the field of social work. So, that would be education is my way of thinking. And then under private, it might be good to have more private practices. We have a lot of public, areas. So that's just a general overview of what I was looking at. Some possible gaps would be like child welfare, KBC, or trauma, or, you can help name any other potential. So that's it. And with that, I can turn this over to Angie. I think our next step would be just to figure out, just to ask and see if everybody reviewed the applicants or if they have opinions of people. But Angie, if you want to take that over, you feel free to do that. Because we'll have to reduce 30 to either 3 or 4 candidates, is my understanding.
May I ask a question? Am I on mute? I can't tell.
No, I
can hear you.
I see there's lots of people from out of state. What does that mean? Like, are we supposed to have Kansas residents, or does that mean anything if they're from Las Vegas or they're practicing in Missouri?
So as far as the board governance policy language, there's nothing in the board governance policy that says that's a bar to someone serving on the advisory committee. But I do think, as you weigh whether the advisory committee members can meet the expectations of board members, I think that's something to consider if you think that might be an issue concerning, or maybe a level of difference to evaluate between that and other candidates.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. That was my question too, because, my thought is if someone is out of state and if they have a Kansas license, to me, one important thing would be, are they practicing in Kansas at all? If they're out of state and they're not practicing in Kansas, then that might be something we'd want to look at. But yeah, that was one of my questions too.
And you are getting pretty close to about 10 minutes until the end of the meeting. I just wanted to throw out one thing. Some of the other advisory committees in their discussions and their selection process, members have identified a few candidates that stood out to them, and then they've tried to see if there was consensus among the candidates. So you can use different methods. There's no specified method in terms of how you reach recommendations, but that is something other advisory committees have used.
Yeah, I had a couple that jumped out. I don't know, would it be better to, before next meeting, come up with our top 5, or can we speak to those? Maybe some people have already identified some candidates. We could list those, I don't know. like I put Tina Lashley, she's an LCSW, primarily because she was in the Crawford County, which I don't have marked here. I have my other. Anyways, it's kind of. She is in Crawford County, I believe is what that is called. And I'm going to see. But anyways, the reason why I picked her is because she is an outpatient for the Safe House, which is more about domestic violence and, you know, areas of outpatient treatment for those that, you know, come from abusive backgrounds or recovery. And I thought that was a very prominent, you know, expertise. And also I not that this makes it, I've known Tina in the past. She's a real hard worker and very solid candidate. Well, that one popped out to me, but maybe there's others. I don't know how to go about this.
I know it's such a broad, hard to narrow down our different candidates. Does anybody have thoughts on how, on the approach that we take? Because we would be looking to add on 3 to 4 different new members.
How about if we kind of nominated, I think we did last time, didn't we, Carolyn, where we just not like did our top 3 or something?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then we saw how many were similar. We just like check marked it and we saw who.
Yeah. And we might want to start with our top 5, you know, and so that if there's, you know, because it may be hard to agree on everybody's top 3, but if we had 5 and had some broader, you know, selection numbers. I was wondering if there's anybody that you know now that you just wouldn't want, I mean, people that we can cross off now as we continue to review applicants, I'm assuming before next meeting.
Well, and you may want to start from the other direction and just identify.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Like I was saying, the top. Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good.
Well, I like Mary Gill.
Yes.
And Eric Shoemaker. I think it's Shoemaker. Is it Shoemaker? Nectar? I don't know. And then my other top one was Tina Lashley. Those are my 3 that stood out to me.
I have those same ones in addition, the Catherine Reck, the LBSW.
Which one is that? I'm sorry, I'm marking these as we're.
Catherine Reck, R-E-C-H.
Okay. R-E-C-H. Okay.
She is one of the only BSWs. Oh, here's another one.
Mm-hmm.
But I like that she had healthcare and rehab.
Yeah.
Nursing facility.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And Topeka is a pretty large area, so it's, I think it's having 2 representatives from Topeka would be good.
Mm-hmm.
I like Tasha Parker, the educator at WSU.
Tasha, okay.
And Rhonda Weimer I had down, Tina Lashley, and Tanya Rickliffs.
Who was before? Who was after Tina? I'm sorry, I missed that one.
Tina,
Then you said Tasha Parker.
Right. Oh, and there Tanya Rickliff.
Okay.
Who looks like she has some military background, quite a bit of mediation background.
Didn't you say Rhonda Weimer too?
I did.
Okay.
Okay.
I would concur with, this is Robin, I would concur with Rhonda Weimer. She's also at Fort Hays State and she's in Ellis County, which leans toward that Northwest Kansas area. Mm-hmm. And I know if
Yes.
She's the SW program director, and I know that you have to be working on a doctorate degree if you're a professor there as well. So I'm assuming she's working on that.
And she's in social worker too. It's in
Yes.
social. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good educator. I would agree.
And then I can't remember the name, Kristen, the LBSW Kristen mentioned as well, that's in rehab.
Catherine Rett.
Thank you.
Yes. Anybody else?
You have named about everybody I had on my list. I had Rhonda, Eric, I had Mindy Schneider from Children's Mercy. I felt like she had a good resume. And I had Tasha Parker, and I did have Lacey Lee and Nanette McLean. But I concur with everybody that you guys have said. There was no one there that I didn't feel like was someone that I didn't think would be a good candidate. So I'm good with what you said.
I was wondering, I've been marking little X's as we're talking, but I was wondering if we all could submit our top 5 to maybe David or to, I don't know. And so that we could kind of have a list, because I marked, but I don't know, I might have missed one. And there are members that haven't, you know.
So
Like Leanne to be involved, you know.
Yeah, the discussion as far as recommendations is done in an open meeting, so I don't know that, I'm not sure how it would go in terms of submitting anything outside of that, in terms of making, you know, top candidates, because I suppose that could be interpreted as sort of a private ballot kind of thing. But
Okay.
I can read off who I have marked in terms of how many I have down based on what people have said.
Okay. Can we start from the top?
Sure, unless any other members have any other individuals to name.
Did Mike say his? No, Mike, do you have anyone?
I'd like to hear the list.
Okay.
And then I can comment.
Okay, and I apologize if I missed anyone, but I've tried to write them down as we've gone. So from the beginning of the list, just alphabetical order, Mary Gill, I had down that Angie and Kristen had marked in favor. For Tina Lashley, I had down Angie, Carolyn, Kristen, and Donna. Nanette McLean, I had down Jane. For Tasha Parker, I had down Donna and Jane. Catherine Reck, I had down Kristen and Robin. Tanya Rickliff, I had down Donna. Misty Snyder, I had Jane. Eric Schoenecker, I had Angie, Kristen, and Jane. And then for Rhonda Weimer, I had down Donna, Robin, and Jane.
Gosh, that was good. I'm impressed.
Yeah.
So Tina Lashley has 4.
Eric has 3.
Eric Schoenecker has 3, and Rhonda Weimer has 3. And then there are 3 other individuals with 2 and 2, or 3 with 1.
Is it important to get Leanne's input too? I mean, I don't know if she'll be here next time or if she needs to. I guess we can ask her next time.
Well, I mean, if you have a consensus and you want to make recommendations, you could do that today.
All the committees, in other instances, not all the committee members were present when they did it. The nominations.
Yeah. So it depends if your committee feels comfortable making the decision today. 2 of the advisory committees have already had members added, and then 2 others have recommendations they've made that are pending for the next board meeting. So It just kind of depends if you feel comfortable making the recommendations today.
And I'm sorry, David, how many total do we have that more than one person is recommending?
Tina Lashley has 4. Eric Shoemaker has 3. And Rhonda Weimer has 3. And then there's several that have 2.
I think there are, three people who have 2.
And we need 3 to 5 positions filled, right?
Yeah, the board governance policy doesn't have a maximum. Been discussed, generally no more than 10 non-board members in the advisory committee. There's currently 6, and so within that could be 3 or 4 if that's what you would want to add.
So the only thing that I would put out there just for us to think about, and I know it is 3 o'clock, the top 3 candidates, Tina Lashley, Eric Schoenecker, and Rhonda Weimer, those appear to be, with exception to Tina, the other 2 appear to be in more director positions, which I don't disagree with, but I also would just want us to consider if we want to find a balance of non-director level individuals to join our committee. So we could really get someone that is practicing, and that's not to say that these individuals, they may be practicing some, so I can't say for certain, but just something for us to consider.
Are they directors in different areas though? Or they, I haven't even looked at that,
Educational directors for the program? Is that what you mean, Andre?
I just mean directors in general versus being
administrative.
Yes, thank you, versus being direct service staff.
Yeah.
Yeah, on the document that I had provided, I tried to grab their current occupation and identify that for the committee. So for Tina Lashley, sole proprietor for outpatient therapy services in Pittsburgh, Kansas, and outpatient therapist for Safe House Crisis in Pittsburgh, Kansas. Eric Schoenecker, I had down a psychologist level 3 for Parsons State Hospital and Training Center, clinical director and chief executive officer for Monarch Psychotherapy. And then for Rhonda Weimer, program director for Masters in Social Work at the program at Fort Hays State University.
Currently, Carolyn's the only retired educator. When she goes off, you're not going to have any educators.
That's the question I want to ask. As board members, do we include ourselves in the diversity? Aren't we? We're not the committee. We're board members running the committee, chairing the committee. So we're really not viewed as committee members, are we? Or do we add our diversity in our non-board member diversity?
I can only speak for myself, and you add the diversity because you're the person I go to when I have educational questions.
Yes. Yeah. Obviously, I put down that one of the potential gaps was, an educator, which was not including myself. But
so then that potentially could be Rhonda Weimer, correct, to fill that role.
Hang on here. I thought of another one here. I'm gonna have to. I think I'm gonna have to organize my thoughts a little bit more around this. I'm sorry I didn't really come quite as prepared. And I think I circled a couple, but I think I need to add a couple more. I don't know how everybody else feels about that.
Okay, so David, would we be able to take out everybody else's names other than the ones that got multiple votes? Would that be okay, Carolyn, and the rest of the committee?
I'm okay.
This is Mike.
Mm-hmm.
Just a simple clarification question. The third person that's listed on the list, William Bernhardt Purdy, although it lists like McLean, Virginia as the current work location, that I don't think is correct. I don't know for sure. I wouldn't want that person to just be excluded because of listing a state. That's where that company is headquartered. That's where SRI, Strategic Resources Incorporated, that's where they're located, is in McLean, Virginia.
Oh.
Anyway.
Okay, I appreciate you adding that.
Just a comment on that.
Yeah, for this
Because
list.
I am a military family life counselor. That is what I do for the military. And I have worked for Strategic Resources Incorporated in the past. I don't currently, but I have in the past. Yeah. And I don't know this person, this Bill Bernhardt Purdy.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you adding that. Yeah, well, I took this list from what I could get from the resumes and cover letters that individuals had written.
Right.
So definitely review that materials. This was as a try to assist you with helping to summarize some of that information, but definitely use the other materials that you have too when evaluating candidates.
David, I found my list. I'm sorry, so I could add just a couple more. I did agree with Catherine Rich, or and so that would add another one. I had Mary Gill, so that would add another slash there. And I mentioned Tina. I have a new one, Sarah Vernon in Hayes, Kansas. She was KVC, and I thought just that topic is is very relevant. I'm looking at diversity and so that I wanted to add that too. I don't know how that changes our numbers.
Sorry, Karen, could you repeat those people again?
Yes, I will. I mentioned Tina and then Sarah Vernon, and she's a KVC. And I have listed Mary Gill or Guile, BSW. I've listed Catherine Rich.
So.
And that quick review, that's not 5, but it's just.
Just to complicate things further, I would love for us to add in Lacey Lee. I appreciate that there's the school-based social work approach, which is something that we've most recently heard public comment on in this committee, and it's a growing field. It's growing tremendously in almost every district. So I would really like for us to consider a school-based social worker.
Excellent observation.
What did you say, Mike?
I would agree with that.
And someone had already said Lacey Lee, didn't they? Because I have down 3 for Lacey Lee.
Oh, okay. My apologies.
I had 1.
1, but then Andrea and Mike.
Oh, so 3 total now.
And I had Lacey, yeah.
Okay. Okay, well, here's something that I could do. It sounds like there's an interest in the advisory committee, basically narrowing this field and then coming back to discuss for recommendations. So you had 30 candidates, which is quite a few. It's definitely more than double the next closest advisory committee in terms of candidates to review. There are, I think, 11 that I have down who received at least 1 mention from an advisory committee member. So I could condense the list from 30 down to 11, and then you could review those at another time with the expectation of reaching recommendations on new members. Is that something that you would be interested in?
David, I have a question. Is it allowable to vote on some electronic platform, or is that not allowable within our, like, in between meetings? I'm asking.
Yeah, I think that might be difficult because it really needs to be in an open meeting.
Okay.
Now you could try to find a time for just a short follow-up meeting if you wanted to just do that for the purpose of finalizing recommendations. So that's an option, but I think any kind of thing like that would have to be done probably in a meeting.
Makes sense.
And
all right.
If you do it before the November 4th, is that the board meeting?
I think November 8th is the next board meeting.
I was gonna say it can't be before. If you do it before the 8th, then it can be included on the next board meeting agenda.
Why don't we eliminate all of those that just had 1 vote?
Yeah. I would agree. And I think that it would really be helpful to have that list that Dave is talking to, just and then the votes maybe decided. Because I only had 10 instead of 11, so obviously I haven't wrote down the information correctly.
Is there anyone opposed? Because I do need to get going. My apologies. Is there anybody opposed to having a very short meeting just to narrow down our 3 to 4 candidates and choose them prior to November 8th?
If we can do that, I support that.
Okay, we will plan for that then. Does that sound okay, David and Leslie?
Yeah, and I can send out a doodle poll for sometime that week before the board meeting to get some options for times. And then if we have a majority of board members who can attend one of those, we can go ahead and schedule that and then have a short meeting for that purpose.
Perfect, because then they could potentially, I'm thinking, join us for our last December Social Work Advisory Committee meeting. Would that be accurate?
So it relies upon a decision being made at the board meeting, because ultimately it's the chair of the board who adds members. And the recommendations have to be submitted to the chair of the board with an opportunity for additional input. So if the chair is able to make a decision to confirm, because the chair of the board does have the option to do something different. But yeah, if they are put on at that November meeting, they would be available to come to the December meeting.
Okay.
Cool.
Did you want to set your next meeting, Andrea?
So I think David's going to send out a doodle poll. And then the next committee meeting would be December 21st, which is right by the holidays. Is everybody going to be available December 21st at 1 o'clock?
I will be.
Okay, I'm looking at a lot of nods, yes.
Yes, I will be. I did have a point of question. David, are you going to be able to send out that list of those names?
Yes.
Within a week or?
Yeah, I should be able to do that. I should be able to send that out tomorrow. If not, yeah, this afternoon might be a little tough, but probably by tomorrow I can send that out for you guys to review. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Andrea, real quick, when is our next?
Sorry to interrupt about the meeting.
Andrea, I'm sorry, when is our next social work meeting?
That would be December 21st at 1 p.m.
I hear the jingle bells.
Okay. A board meeting on November the 8th?
Yes.
Okay, because I don't have that in my calendar. But I might need the invite for that.
Thank you, Donna. Sorry about that. I will make sure that you get that.
And what time?
That the board meetings are from 10 a.m. until 1 p.m.
Okay.
All right. Well, we had a very, very, very productive meeting today. Thank you all for your input and guidance, and we will take this information back to the board, but we will look forward to meeting prior to the next board meeting so that we can determine our next social work advisory committee meeting, members, and then we'll go from there. So we'll look forward to seeing you here in just a couple of short weeks. That is the end of our agenda. Can I please get a motion to adjourn?
This is Carolyn. I move that we adjourn today's meeting.
And I second it.
Thank you, Carolyn. Thank you, Angie. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Thank you, Mike. All right, motion carries. Thank you all very much. We are adjourned. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much. Bye now.
Bye, Mike.
Bye.